This episode takes place over the course of 1 week, and it does a good job of nailing down the timeline for some of the movies earlier in the MCU. We find out that the events of Iron Man 2 happen simultaneously with the events of the first Thor movie and also the Incredible Hulk. And it's just kind of neat to see how all of those different events from the different movies unfolded within the same period of time. Quite often when I do review breakdowns for TV shows and movies, I'll give it the is bad label, and that's not because I'm trying to be edgy, it's because those TV shows and movies are objectively bad for a variety of reasons. However, I also try to be fair and point out things that were done well or things that I liked. At the time of this recording, I've already seen most of the other episodes in the What If series, and I can say that it is absolute garbage, and I will be making videos about those. But episode 3 stands out as a little surprising because it wasn't completely terrible. Now, to be fair, it wasn't exactly good either, but it was the least bad of them all. And saying that this episode in a series that is almost completely trash is watchable is probably the highest praise that I can give it. Marvel's What If is bad. Episode 3. We open on Monday with Nick Fury trying to recruit Tony Stark during the events of Iron Man 2, and everything happens the same as it did in the movie up until the point where Natasha tries to inject Tony with the antidote to help with his condition, except this time, instead of helping, it immediately kills him. This intro is quick and concise and makes a lot more sense than the previous 2 episodes while still leaving in some of the mystery. However, this episode does have a problem that the other episodes in the What If series don't really have, because what normally happens in these What If episodes, it will begin with a familiar scene and then it quickly branches off into something completely different that we never saw in the movies. But in this episode, because it's affecting several characters, Tony Stark, Hawkeye, Thor, Bruce Banner, what we end up getting is a lot of reused content, stuff that we already saw in the movies. Those scenes are played out again, except with small differences. So rather than having one intro and then branching off into a completely different storyline for the rest of the episode, but in this episode, what we essentially get is a bunch of different intros that follow one another. That actually brings up something else that I wanted to point out about the entire What If series, and that's the reuse of audio from the movies. Some of the actors did not want to participate in the What If series, the biggest one being Robert Downey Jr., but for whatever reason...
Hello, I like money.
While most of the actors are reprising their character roles, some of them didn't. So what happens is that Disney reused audio from the movies, and it's pretty obvious when they do it, as it doesn't quite exactly fit with the new, slightly different situations, and it just sounds a little bit different from the other recorded audio, and just seems a little bit weird and out of place. That's not a critique of this episode in particular, it's just the series as a whole ended up reusing a lot of stuff in order to cut costs, which by itself isn't bad. The problem is that it's noticeable.
Congratulations, you're a failure.
Getting back, the episode moves to Tuesday. Coulson is investigating the mysterious hammer that fell in the desert. Meanwhile, Natasha has been arrested for what happened with Tony Stark. Nick Fury knows that she didn't do anything, and he sneaks her the same injectable device that she had used on Tony. The plan is for her to escape and then investigate what went wrong with the injector. But this is handled in a dumb and sloppy way. Natasha's hands are cuffed behind her back, and the device is bigger than both of her hands combined. There's no way that she could possibly hide this. There are several security guards that are standing right next to her, including a couple that are directly behind her that would have easily been able to see this. There's just no possible way that Nick Fury would have been able to give this large device to Natasha and have kept it hidden. It's just not going to happen. And this goes to a point that I've already made about the series as a whole, which is the overall lack of attention to detail, because the show creators and the writers simply don't care. They want a specific outcome or a specific situation to happen, and they just set it up in whatever sloppy way possible. It doesn't matter if it's illogical or incoherent or just utterly ridiculous. They don't care. They just want it to happen to move the story along.
And it confirms the worst. Somehow Palpatine returned.
But don't worry, it gets worse. Unfortunately, another bit of stupidity has returned in making Black Widow stronger than she actually is. This is a more recent thing, and Disney, in their infinite wisdom, decided that Black Widow, for some reason, should be just as strong and just as durable as someone like Captain America or even Thor in some situations. And what ended up happening in this episode is inside the transport, Natasha is being guarded by 10 men. She manages to pick the lock on her handcuffs and begins attacking them. Certainly it's true that Natasha, with her great amount of combat training, can hold her own and would even be able to face off against men that are larger than her, especially if those men happen to be out of shape or lack combat training. However, the 10 guys in this transport are not just random guys working for some Russian mob boss. All of the men that are inside this transport are extremely highly trained SHIELD agents. These guys are some of the best in the world. They've gotten training that is on par with anything that Natasha has got. On top of that, all of them are twice her size, and they are wearing body armor, which means that a lot of the strikes that are going to be to the torso would be completely ineffective. There's absolutely zero chance that Natasha could beat up these guys and then escape, and what's worse, this isn't even the type of character that Black Widow is supposed to be. She doesn't just fight her way out of all of these different situations. That's not what she does. She uses her intelligence, her cunning, her guile to get out of these situations and to turn things to her advantage, making her just a small version of Captain America without even the benefit of the super serum is stupid.
You sit on a throne of lies.
Later that night, we get the events of the first Thor movie. Nick Fury has joined Hawkeye at the location of Mjolnir in the desert, and once again, Thor arrives and fights his way to the hammer. And just like in the movie, Hawkeye is told to hold his fire, but it appears that somehow he lets it slip and the arrow goes loose. This hits a now mortal Thor, killing him instantly. And I can't help but feeling that they missed an opportunity to have this event happen on Tuesday instead of Thursday, but whatever. This situation doesn't actually make any sense with the big reveal that happens later in the episode, but I'll talk about that later. Hawkeye is then taken into custody and placed into a secure cell all by himself, but later when Nick Fury goes to talk to him, they find that Hawkeye is dead, despite the fact that he's had no contact with anyone, and the cell was completely isolated, and there shouldn't have been any way for anything to have happened to him. It's a complete mystery as to how Hawkeye died. Moving to Wednesday, Natasha has arrived at a university in Virginia where she meets up with Betty Ross, who's an expert in biological research. Upon inspection, however, Betty discovers that the injector was damaged. The antidote had never been delivered, which means that the antidote is still in the device, and this should have been immediately apparent to Natasha, Nick Fury, and really anybody that happened to handle it. It would have been as simple as unscrewing the bottom and seeing that the vial was still completely full of the antidote. So how would you not possibly see this? Also, Betty doesn't exactly need to do any sophisticated work to find this out. It's not like her expertise was actually required, because she simply looks at the device under a microscope, which really anybody could have done.
That's a good idea. I like that.
At this point, Natasha gets a call from Nick Fury telling her that Hawkeye is dead, and he says that the connection from Hawkeye to all the others is the Avengers Initiative, and this brings me to the previous issue with Thor. He had just arrived on Earth, S.H.I.E.L.D. had no idea who he was or what he was capable of, and they didn't even know what Mjolnir was. He was never on the Avengers Initiative to begin with because they didn't even know that he existed, and there is more to this, and I'll cover that later. Natasha notices some extra men's clothing in the lab, and because Betty is dating Bruce Banner, Natasha quickly figures out that Bruce is hiding in the room in one of the cabinets, and then after finding him, she explains that they all need to leave very quickly because everybody's in danger. However, Bruce says that it's better for him to be by himself because it's safer for everyone and he can't die, which is actually true, but because the writers on this series have no understanding of the source material, it's about to get dumb very quickly.
It is a tale told by an idiot.
Thunderbolt Ross has arrived with a group of soldiers and vehicles, but suddenly out of nowhere, Bruce is shot by a sniper, causing Bruce to turn into the Hulk, but we can clearly see that Thunderbolt Ross was not the one responsible for it. Hulk begins fighting the soldiers and destroying the vehicles, and while he's doing that, he suddenly begins growing larger and larger in a very strange way until he suddenly bursts into a large spray of goo, seemingly killing him instantly. Back in the desert, Loki has arrived with an army from Asgard seeking justice for Thor and begins attacking all of the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. Nick Fury manages to stop the fighting by convincing Loki that they're on the same side and trying to find the same killer. Loki agrees, but only gives Nick Fury a single day to find out who's responsible. Natasha has once again gone into hiding and sneaks into a public library to use the computers in order to connect to S.H.I.E.L.D.'s database. She discovers that a woman who had died several years ago somehow accessed S.H.I.E.L.D.'s database within just the last few days, and this clues her into the identity of the episode's hidden bad guy. She tries to call Nick Fury to give him the information, but is attacked in the process. She does manage to leave a message for him on his voicemail, but she does so in the dumbest, most cryptic way possible, and she says that it's about hope, it's all about hope. Now, obviously, the way that this is done is for the audience because the show and the writers don't want to reveal exactly who the bad guy is just yet, but this is incredibly stupid because there's no way that super spy expert Natasha would deliberately leave a cryptic message in this situation. Certainly, there are going to be situations where she needs to leave a cryptic message because she doesn't want the information to get out there, but this is not one of those situations at all. She doesn't need to keep the name of the hidden bad guy secret. In fact, she should want everybody to know who it is so that they can be on the lookout for it. And also, it's not like the hidden bad guy wouldn't know that she's giving out this information, because she is quite literally being attacked by the hidden bad guy while she is making the phone call. So again, this is all done for the benefit of the audience in order to keep it a mystery, but in order for that to happen, you have to make the characters incredibly stupid, which is just lazy writing.
I know a killer when I see one.
Nick Fury listens to the message repeatedly but can't quite figure it out, and unfortunately Loki's deadline is fast approaching. So Nick goes into his car to get the beeper that would be used to call Captain Marvel, as he thinks it would be their last hope. And when he says this to Coulson, he suddenly realizes that Natasha wasn't talking about a feeling of hope in the message, but rather the name of Hope.
Now we have a firm grasp of the obvious.
Thankfully, this means that Nick Fury doesn't activate the beeper, and we don't have to see that garbage fire of a character, Captain Marvel. The next morning, on Thursday, Nick arrives at the grave of Hope, specifically Hope Van Dyne, where he gets confronted by Hank Pym, who is incredibly angry that Nick Fury would go to his daughter's grave. And this is where we find out what the changes were that caused this new timeline. In this universe, Hope Van Dyne decided to join S.H.I.E.L.D. and ended up dying on a mission in a manner very similar to how her mother did, and this caused Hank to seek revenge against Nick Fury and the rest of S.H.I.E.L.D. We see that Hank Pym is no longer using the Ant-Man costume and instead using something that looks more like the Yellow Jacket suit. We get several flashbacks showing exactly how Hank managed to kill the Avengers. With Tony Stark, he hid inside the device and used it to take out Stark from the inside. He also bumped Hawkeye's hand, causing him to release the arrow that killed Thor, and he snuck inside Hawkeye's cell and took him out in a way very similar to Tony Stark, from the inside. For Bruce Banner, he rode the bullet to enter his body, and then used a device on Bruce's heart that would cause the Hulk to explode, and we don't exactly see how he killed Natasha, but it's probably very similar to Stark and Hawkeye. The writers then try to cover up a glaring plot hole, but of course they fail miserably. Since Thor was not part of the Avengers Initiative, why would Hank Pym try to take him out? And Nick Fury actually asked this question to Hank, in which Hank responds that he took out Thor because he felt that Nick Fury would eventually recruit him.
What good are you? Do you have a brain?
Which of course makes no sense at all. At the time, no one knew that Thor was from Asgard. He was just some guy running through a S.H.I.E.L.D. camp. There was no reason whatsoever for Hank Pym to take out Thor. In fact, it would have been the exact opposite, because up until this point, Thor had been fighting all of the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents around the Hammer. And anyone seeing this would immediately think that Thor was an enemy of S.H.I.E.L.D., not that he would be willing to work with them. So if Hank saw this, he would likely be very happy to see the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents getting beaten up and taken out by this strange guy who just appeared at the camp around the Hammer. There's no reason that Hank would have wanted to take him out. If anything, he would have either tried to become an ally with him or just let Thor continue doing whatever he was going to do. I mean, he was basically helping Hank Pym by attacking the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. So it simply makes no sense at all for Hank to take out Thor. But again, the writers knew this was going to be an issue, so they brought it up and gave this really sloppy, ham-fisted, stupid explanation of, oh, well, Nick Fury would eventually recruit him. And despite the fact that it makes no sense, that's what they went with.
Oh, you can smell the shit from 5 miles away.
As for the Incredible Hulk, that is also complete nonsense. When Bruce Banner said earlier that he can't die, that's true. Because even if the Hulk has his body destroyed like it was shown in this episode, he still would have reformed and healed back to normal. There have been numerous occasions where the Hulk's entire body is annihilated and he still comes back from it. Anything short of cosmic beings or a reality warper is not going to be able to get rid of the Hulk. It can't happen. Once again, proving that Disney writers don't understand the source material or they just don't care. And it doesn't matter that this is a what-if episode taking place in a different timeline in a different universe, because the change that happened in this one was Hope Van Dyne joining S.H.I.E.L.D., and that would have had absolutely no impact at all in any way about how the Hulk functions.
Thanks for the good news.
After the flashback, Hank attacks Nick Fury, but somehow Nick is able to effortlessly defeat Hank Pym and even shows strength and agility far beyond what he should have. And then Nick begins using magic, and it's revealed that it's actually Loki disguising himself as Nick Fury. Hank is defeated and then taken away by the army of Asgard. The next afternoon on Friday, it's revealed that Loki had decided not to leave the planet and instead was able to conquer it in just one day and is now the ruler of Earth, which realistically would have been very short-lived even after the episode is over because Odin simply wouldn't allow that to continue. At this point, just like in the first Thor movie, Odin is in the Odin sleep, but he ended up waking up at the end of the Thor movie, which is only a couple days away in this time period. So Odin would wake up, he'd see what Loki did, and he'd say, no, you're not allowed to control the Earth, you gotta come back to Asgard, and he would have put an end to it. Of course, Nick Fury doesn't know any of this, so he's gonna take some steps in order to try to fight Loki. In the next scene, we see Nick Fury and Coulson in an empty building containing the coffins of the Avengers, except this is really dumb because two of them shouldn't be there. First is the Hulk, for the reasons that I've already explained, but even if you ignore that one, for what possible reason would there be a coffin with a hammer icon for Thor? He was not part of the Avengers Initiative. You're telling me that after he died and after all the events that have happened in the last week, they went out and got this custom drape made with a hammer logo on it to put on the coffin of Thor.
Why?
A guy that they had never met. Someone that Nick Fury and Coulson had never ever even spoken to. The only time they had ever seen him was when he showed up and when he had accidentally been hit by the arrow. That's it.
Who the hell is this bitch?
Why would they put him in the same category as all of the other characters that were in the Avengers Initiative?
What the hell am I doing here?
But don't worry, it gets worse. Remember, the entire reason why Loki and the Asgard army came to Earth was to seek justice for what happened to Thor, so for what possible reason would they simply leave his body there in the custody of S.H.I.E.L.D.? And even at this point in time, if Loki is evil and doesn't care about anything beyond his own motivations, it would still make sense for him to return the body of Thor to Asgard so that Loki can be heralded as the hero who had avenged his brother. Remember, they did something similar in the actual Thor movie when Loki got the Frost Giants to come into Asgard, and then he killed the Frost Giants to try to win the favor of Odin and the rest of the Asgardians in order to make himself look like a hero. And don't forget that Loki is bringing Hank Pym back to Asgard for his punishment, so why would he bring Hank Pym to Asgard and put him in the cell and then just leave Thor's body on Earth? It doesn't make any sense at all. Once more, it's the show's writers not paying attention to detail and the fact that they want certain things to happen. Basically, they want to have all of the Avenger coffins in the same room, and they want to have fancy little logos and stuff on all of them representing each of the different characters, and they want that to happen, not thinking that it makes no sense whatsoever for Thor to be included with that group.
That's not an opinion, it's a fact.
But unfortunately, there's an even more terrible part of this episode's ending, and that is when Nick Fury uses the beeper to call the garbage fire Captain Marvel back to Earth. And even though she's only on the screen for a couple seconds, that is still far too long. The only appropriate amount of time that Captain Marvel should ever be on screen is 0. But it's even dumber, because at the same time he uses the beeper to call the garbage fire, Nick Fury also goes to the recently discovered area with Captain America, who's still frozen in ice. But realistically, it's kind of irrelevant to even go and get Captain America at this point, because the people at Disney decided to go full-on woke with Captain Marvel, and they insisted that the new female superhero must be stronger than all of the other male superheroes combined. And of course, this creates a problem when you have a character that is able to solve virtually any problem by herself. She's able to defeat entire armies and fleets of starships single-handedly, and was even able to overpower Thanos, who at the time had all 6 Infinity Stones, which is so unbelievably absurd, only someone woke could write something that dumb. Nick Fury says that his plan is to assemble a new team of Avengers, but it's completely unnecessary because with the way that Disney has overpowered Captain Marvel, now that she's on Earth, she could effortlessly defeat Loki, his entire army, send them all back to Asgard, probably within the span of just a couple hours. You don't need a team of Avengers because Captain Marvel has been turned into this unbelievably overpowered character that can solve every single issue by herself. It's all just really stupid. But that's the end of episode 3.